right. Well, good morning, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants event. My name is Joe Grabowski, and I'll be your host for today. A big shout out to all the classrooms who have joined us this month. Our month of March is coming to an end. We've hosted over 30 live events connecting classrooms with scientists, adventurers, explorers, and conservationists from around the world. Believe it or not, we're not done yet. We still have a few more events to squeeze in before the end of the month. And then, of course, we've already launched our April events up on our website. If you visit exploringbytheseat.com, you can find all the events we have coming up and register to tune in live, jump in camera spots, check us out on YouTube, whatever is best for your class. We always look forward to seeing you. So today, if you were joining for the Toucan Rescue Ranch, you will see that this is not the Toucan Rescue Ranch. Unfortunately, they're in Costa Rica, and today when they came in, there was no internet connectivity. So the company was working on it, the internet provider, and they were not able to troubleshoot in time. So that means we are going to go to plan B. And I think it's a pretty good plan B. We're going to do some scuba diving adventures. So I'm going to be the host and the speaker for today. I've been lucky enough to be diving in places around the world since 2007. I lived in Australia for a year, and that's where I started diving. And ever since then, I've been diving and training and learning new skills, diving in new places, diving more complicated dives. And I've been really lucky to see part of the planet that not a lot of people get to experience in person. So I'm going to share some of that with you today, and then we can turn things loose, of course, with some Q&A action. So let's jump right into it. I'm going to share my screen. You should see it in just a moment here, and then we are going to be off. So here we go. And let's bring that presentation front and center and go. So if for some reason it's not full screen, if one of the teachers joining in a camera spot can unmute and let me know, but I think we should be fine. I'll keep an eye out for your messages as well. So as we jump right into it, this is what I love to do. I love to get into the water, and I love to dive. I've been doing it since 2007, like I mentioned. And I really like this picture because this picture here is the first dive that I was ever on. So it's kind of cool to be able to have this picture here and look back. I can see some things I was doing wrong that aren't right in the picture, but it was my first dive. And I was really lucky because my first dive was on the Great Barrier Reef in Australia. We're going to talk a little bit about that and why that was pretty lucky. Here's another picture. We can call this a scuba selfie. This is in Mexico. And so I turn the camera back on myself to share this scuba selfie here. And then sometimes I go into the water without my tank and equipment. I just have my mask and my snorkel and my flippers, my fins, and that's called free diving. So I hold my breath and I go down and stay under for as long as I can. So this is a lake in Australia on a place called Fraser Island. And you can see I found a turtle down at the bottom, about 30 feet down. There was dozens and dozens of turtles sitting in the mud. And so I brought this guy up for a little closer look, but then of course, let him or her go and return back to the mud. And then sometimes you can do really fun things when you're in the water. And this was in Ontario in Canada. And this is colder diving. You can see I'm wearing a lot more gear and protection, and I found a bike. So I tried some scuba cycling to see what that was all about. So the Great Barrier Reef is amazing. It stretches for thousands of kilometers along the coast of Queensland in Australia. It's made by living things, tiny little living things called polyps. It's not one big reef. It's actually thousands of reefs and islands that make it up. And it's visible from space, one of the only natural structures you can see from space or made by a living thing, which is pretty cool. And when you look at it from above, it doesn't look that impressive. It's just water. Maybe there's some rocks under there that's giving it that different color. But once you get below the surface, it's a totally different world. Here's a black-tip reef shark hanging out on the reef. And the thing about sharks is you're so lucky if the sharks stick around. They don't usually hang out with humans. They see us, we're weird, we're strange, we're loud in the water. They usually turn the other way. So it's really lucky when they spend a little time with you and you get to take some pictures of them. These are parrotfish. These parrotfish are all over coral reefs. Their mouths, if you look closely, look like little beaks of a parrot. And it's not quiet on a coral reef. If parrotfish are around, it's crunch, 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 crunch. They crunch up that coral. And then if you watch them long enough, they poop sand. That's right. What they can't eat, they poop out as sand. So if you've ever been on a beautiful tropical beach, laying in the sand, that sand has probably passed through a parrotfish. So think about that. It's parrotfish poop. Finding Nemo. I'm sure lots of you have watched Finding Nemo. We've got a couple clownfish here hanging out in their sea anemone. You can see them kind of looking down at them from above. Giant clams. If you've ever been in a lake and picked up a clam, they're not very big, maybe a few inches, 4 or 5 inches. This giant clam, if you have a meter stick or a yardstick in your classroom, that's how long that clam was. So they really live up to that giant clam name. You can see the valve open there. They pull in water. They're filter feeders. So they're taking good stuff out of the water that they like to eat. Beautiful colors on the coral reef with this green sea turtle swimming by. Now, it doesn't look very green, but they get that name because of what they eat. They eat seagrass, they eat algae, and all that green food turns their fat green. If we could look inside of this sea turtle, you would see that its fat is greenish in color, and that's because of all of that yummy seagrass and other green stuff they like to eat. Stingrays are common on the reef. You can see this is a blue spotted stingray. Lots of misconceptions about stingrays. You have nothing to worry about stingrays. They sting in self-defense. You'd have to swim down and try to grab that stingray to get stung, or occasionally they hide under the sand. So if you were walking in shallow water and step on one, then you might find yourself getting stung. But most people avoid that if they shuffle their feet. If they're walking through the sand, they kind of shuffle their feet instead of stepping, and that'll scare the stingrays away before they get stepped on. Small things are fun to look for on coral reefs. This is a nudibranch. This nudibranch is kind of like a sea slug, but they get their name. Nudibranch means naked lungs. And if you look at these feathery things at the back, this is how they breathe. It's on the outside, and it absorbs oxygen from the water. And they often have these beautiful colors like this one here to signify to predators that, you know what, we can be toxic, so you do not want to eat us. Cuttlefish are super cool. This cuttlefish kind of looks like a squid or an octopus, kind of a cross in between. Obviously, they're in the same group, mollusks, and they're super curious. So they're always kind of looking at divers and checking them out. And they can grow as big as a meter stick. If you have a meter stick or a yardstick in your classroom, you can see how big that those cuttlefish can be. And it's not always the big things you look out for. It's the small things that can be the most dangerous. This stonefish here, I have it lit up so I can see it really easily. But if I wasn't shining a light on it, it blends in like a stone, like a rock. You wouldn't see it. And if you put your hand down in the wrong spot, it's covered in spines on top. And that venom is powerful enough to really hurt a human, possibly even kill a human. So you want to keep your hands to yourself on the coral reef just because it's the right thing to do. You don't want to damage it, but there's also the risk of touching the wrong thing. Now I'm going to take you to another spot in the world. We're going to head out into the Pacific Ocean, and we are going to Fiji. I had spent some time in Fiji. I dove on some shipwrecks, but again, Fiji's a cool spot for sharks. This is a white-tip reef shark. If you look in the bottom corner, he's being photobombed by a fish here. So that's kind of cool, this photobombing fish with this white-tip reef shark. Here's a few reef sharks. This is a different species. You can see that they're very curious about the divers coming into the water. What does it mean? They want to see. Swimming over top, you can get these beautiful silhouette images of the sharks. And then these blennies, these fish here are so cool. They're like twins. They look identical, and they move in mirror images to each other. So watching the small things can be just as rewarding as watching out for the big things as well. The way they copy each other perfectly like a mirror image. It's really cool. I want to take you closer to home. Let's head back to North America and let's go to Mexico. I love diving in Mexico. I've been lucky enough to dive on both sides of Mexico, in the Caribbean side and the Pacific side, and they're both very different places to dive. The Caribbean side in Cozumel is tropical blue water, obviously very warm, and has a current. It's called drift diving because you jump into the water you don't really have to kick. The water's moving. So it's like you're flying through the water as you move along the reef, and you're flying and looking at all the marine life, and the boat follows along as you're going and then picks you up when you run out of air. So that's the boat. That's the dive boat that we were using. And then we're in this amazing world of underwater life. Looking inside of things like sea sponges is so important. Inside this sea sponge is this arrow crab, these beautiful colors. You can see it's reaching up with one of its legs, trying to figure out what's looking down at it. There's caves in the bottom of the reef, so you can swim through these little caves through the reefs and explore kind of another cool ecosystem on the coral reefs. Here's kind of another picture going through some of those caves. And the cracks and crevices, you look inside and you get rewarded. Here's a snowflake moray eel. You can see the moray eel is not overly happy that I found him or her, but I took my picture and then just let the eel be. Swam on to take a look at some other things. Here's another shark. This is a nurse shark this time. And nurse sharks are nocturnal. That means that they hunt at night, and they don't really have teeth. They have grinding plates. So they look for crabs and things like that, and they crunch them up with those grinding plates. And so this guy's just chilling in the cave, and when the nighttime comes, they become active and they hunt on the reef. Beautiful schools of fish. You can see the color's not quite right, and that's because when you dive, when you go underwater, the deeper you go, the more colors you lose. Color is broken up into different wavelengths or light is broken up into different wavelengths of color: red, orange, yellow, green, blue, and purple. And as you go deeper, you lose the red and the oranges and the yellows until when you're really deep, it's really just the blues that you see. Another stingray showing off its camouflage. This one I can only see because it's kind of being lazy. It's just sitting on top of the sand. If it really wanted to go stealth mode, it would shake its fins, and that would put sand and rocks on top of it, and it would blend in even better, and you would just see those two little eyes poking out from the sand. When you get to see things in the water, sometimes they're endemic. And endemic's a super fancy word I want to use today. Endemic just means it's found nowhere else in the world. It's found in one spot, and this spot only. This is a splendid toadfish, and it's found only around the island of Cozumel. So it's an endemic species. And there's green sea turtles. There's 7 species of sea turtles. This is a hawksbill sea turtle. All the sea turtle species are threatened due to human activity, and the hawksbill ones are definitely in a little higher category of threatened. And you can't really see the colors here, again, because we're so deep here that mostly the blues and the greens are the only colors, the wavelengths of color that are making it that deep. That hawksbill turtle. This is a baby hawksbill sea turtle. It's about the size of a dinner plate, this one here. Whereas that other one that you just saw is probably bigger than your desk. And nighttime is the fun time to jump into the water because a new crew comes out. The day shift hides, goes to sleep, and the night crew comes out. So here's a lobster crawling over the reef. This is one of those eerie in the spotlight, in the flashlight beam, is this nurse shark passing through. Just caught it. And then the octopus are really cool. This is the same octopus, and it's hunting on the reef, and you can see it's changing colors, it's changing its shape as it moves through the coral reef and pounces on crabs and small fish and things like that. This octopus is on the move. And then if you hold your light up, so you just jump in with your flashlight, waterproof, of course, and all these little worms love the light, and so they were kind of my companions swimming in front of the light. If we jump to the other side of Mexico, to the Pacific Ocean side, still warm, but the water's a lot colder and it's not as clear. And so here's a green moray eel. Here's a pufferfish. You can see here, when that pufferfish gets scared, it fills up with water and all those spikes stand up. So you can imagine if you were a shark or a big fish, you would not want to eat that because that would not feel good in your mouth. That would not feel good in your throat. So that's a really great defense that they have. couple more stingrays here, different kind here. I think they're Sea of Cortez stingrays. And we're jumping to Canada. So we're getting some cold water diving now, where you need to wear a suit to help keep you warm. A really thick wetsuit. Some people wear a dry suit so no water gets in. And these are shipwrecks. That's what you explore in Canada. There's some fish, but it's mostly shipwrecks. So we're 155 feet deep in this one in Georgian Bay. And we're exploring a shipwreck called the Four City. And it's on a slant. You can see the angle because it's on a hill underwater. So the top part of it is 60 feet deep. And when you go all the way down to the bottom, as you make your way along the side, it gets to over 150 feet deep right down at the back. So you can see, here's me right here. You can see my light on here and a few other divers as we make our way down. And then there we are at the bottom, the stern, the back of the ship, 155 feet down when you hold your hand down there. Another picture there looking back at the ship. So you always dive with a buddy. That's pretty important for scuba diving because something could go wrong with your equipment. And if your buddy is close by, you can help each other out and make sure that everybody gets to the surface safely. You can see we're breathing these regulators. And then you can see this yellow hose. That's my backup regulator. If something happens to my buddy's air, I can give him my backup, and then we can swim up to the surface together and get out of the water safe. This is a different type of shipwreck in Georgian Bay. This is the Arabia. You can see it kind of looks like a pirate ship almost sitting at the bottom. And there's a look at the wheel of the Arabia. And then in the US, if anyone's near North Carolina, this is a submarine, a German U-boat that was sunk in World War II. And I was lucky enough to get to dive on this one. That was a crazy dive, diving on a submarine. It was really cool. And so I want to take you one more place before we go to some Q&A action. Just off the coast of Florida is Bimini, these two tiny little islands. And Bimini is a shark paradise. So stingrays are sometimes called flat sharks. They're in the same family as sharks, the elasmobranchs, but they're squished. So they get that name of flat sharks. And this stingray here is called the blanket. And in this next picture, you can see why. Look how big this stingray is, and look at the way it's covering up my legs like a big blanket. So she got that name of the blanket. And this time on this trip, my wife was there. And then this is my little guy, Finn. He's a lot older now. He was only 2 in this picture, but he's 9 now. So he's a lot older. He wasn't so sure about the stingray. And you can see we visited the Shark Research Station in Bimini. And so they have these beautiful baby lemon sharks that they catch, they tag so that they can, in the future, they can see how they're doing before they release them. And then you can see this, there's Finn there floating on a little floaty in the pen there. Caribbean reef sharks, they were a lot of fun to swim with. It was kind of strange when the boat stops and there's like 15 or 16 sharks swimming circles around the boat, and then you jump in with them. But it was great. It was great to see them. They never felt threatened. And yeah, great to be in the water with all those sharks. And the best part about diving in Bimini is the great hammerhead sharks. So they can be 10 and 12 feet long. And I got to spend 6 hours over 2 days in the water with these amazing sharks. Look at that, the way they smile for the camera. So cool to be in the water with these hammerhead sharks. There's another shot there. Now, I'm going to play a short video from the Galapagos because I was there not too long ago. I was there in August. And on land in the Galapagos is amazing, but underwater is amazing too. And I know some of you are looking at this picture, there's hammerhead shark, and thinking, whoa, sharks are scary, sharks are dangerous. But I've never felt in danger in the water with sharks, even with sharks twice as big as me. We're just not on their menu. We're not, humans aren't seen as food. Mistakes are made every once in a while, especially early in the morning or in the evening when the water is murky. And people, as surfers, look like seals floating on the top or sea turtles. But, the thing that's scary is that we humans kill 75 to 100 million sharks every year. 75 to 100 million sharks. Think of that. They're caught by accident when we're fishing. They're caught on purpose for shark fin soup, especially in Asian countries. So sometimes I think sharks have a lot more to fear from us than we do of them. And there's way scarier things than sharks. Look at this. Look at this crazy attack that happened in the Galapagos. This is a sea lion, and it's got my fin. I'm just kidding. It was actually really fun. Anytime you're in the water with the sea lions, they're so playful, and they're sneaky too. They like to sneak up and blow bubbles in your face. They like to try to get you to do somersaults with them, and they love stealing your fins if you're not paying attention. So really cool. I'm going to come back from that screen share now. I'm going to play that short video I promised, and then I want to let you guys take over and ask me any questions that you might have. So let me switch my screen share option here, and this time I'm going to bring in the video file. And let's make sure I get the right one. This is it. Here we go. All right, let's take that video out of the call now. And so, yeah, that's just a little taste of some underwater explorations, some cool places, cool marine life, cool shipwrecks. Diving is awesome. Whether you have a tank on your back or you're just doing it on one breath, it's a lot of fun. So I hope everybody, if you're think about 10 years old, you can start taking some Discover Bubbles courses and you can start learning how to dive and then get certified and then start going on some adventures of your own. So if you are tuning in via YouTube, you can use that chat and you can send in some questions as well. We have a few classrooms hanging out on camera with us. So you can, I'm going to bring you in live and you can ask some of your questions, but we'll start off with one here on YouTube from Isaac and Jennifer. And their question is about sharks near shipwrecks. Absolutely. Sharks are often found near shipwrecks for a couple of reasons. One, it's a great spot to shelter, kind of hang out under an overhang, hang out inside. It's a good spot to shelter, especially if you're a smaller shark. Believe it or not, you are on the menu too with bigger sharks. And then shipwrecks attract tons of marine life. They basically become artificial reefs, and over time start to look like coral reefs themselves, as coral and sea anemones and other things grow on the ship. And so if there's lots of fish around, well, sharks are going to come around because there's a spot to get something to eat. So let's start taking a few more questions here. So Miss Nilvo's third graders are hanging out with us in New Mexico. How are we doing today?
We're good.
Good.
Okay, Hope, go ahead and ask.
Where do you want to dive next? Why?
Where do I want to dive next? I'm not too picky. I love to be in the water. Any excuse is a good one. But if someone came to me right now and said, you have to pick, I would say really fast, Cocos Island. So Cocos Island is a small island way off the coast of Costa Rica, and it's a shark paradise. There are tons and tons and tons of sharks, all kinds of different species of sharks, hammerhead sharks, different reef sharks, all kinds of shark species, dusky sharks and things like that, that call that spot home. So I would love to go to Cocos Islands in Costa Rica. It's a good question. We're going to go to Colorado. Let me bring in our Colorado crew. The Alamosa Online School is joining us. How are you doing today?
Hi, very good. So we have a question. Miss Oliver, can you unmute Val? Valeria, we've got a few questions.
Awesome. Oh, I don't think it worked. Now I can't hear you. No, that's okay. Tech, as we learned today, tech doesn't always cooperate, especially connectivity. Well, you can. Oh, I think I'm back.
Okay, yeah, can hear you now?
Yeah, I gotcha.
You can hear me now? Okay. Yeah. All right, Val, go ahead and ask your question. Oh, sorry, trying to do Zoom and this at the same time. Let me unmute.
That's okay.
All right, there we go, Valeria. Speak up.
Have you ever ate a fish?
Have you ever ate fish? Was that the question?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, lots of times. I like seafood just as much as anybody else. But it's, I try to be careful. I try to look for sustainably caught seafood, clams, oysters, things like that, because in a lot of cases, fishing is not done well, and it's causing massive problems. So we have a fishing fleet on Earth, fleet of ships that could fish a planet 3 times the size of Earth. We take way too much fish out of the water. We do it in ways that just grab everything in a lot of cases, scrape the bottom clean, drag through the water, and that kills a lot of bycatch. So bycatch is things caught by mistake, seabirds and sharks and sea turtles and other fish species. So you have to be really careful with your seafood choices. And luckily, there's places, the US, Canada, Europe, seafood guides that you can read about, learn about different fish, which ones to avoid, which ones are more sustainably harvested from the ocean. Unfortunately, our big commercial ships, they can be out for years on end, and they're like giant packing plants that do everything from catch, pack, freeze, basically factories in the ocean. So it's almost like we've declared war on fish in a lot of cases, which is really unfortunate. And fish are really important food sources for millions of people, sources of protein. So we do have to be careful the way that we treat our fish. So yes, absolutely, I've eaten fish, never in the water. Like I've never snuck up on one like a shark, but on land, absolutely. I do enjoy seafood. Good question. We'll come back to your crew and we'll grab another one in a moment. I'm going to grab something online here. This one is from, where did it go? Howard, Miss Howard's crew are wondering about keeping my ears from hurting or popping. And that's a great question. As you go underwater, there's more pressure. And the deeper you go, the greater that pressure is. Humans don't tend to go much further than 200 to 300 feet below the water. It gets really technical. You need different mixtures of gas. So instead of just breathing air, you've got to mix in helium and nitrogen and other gases. Then you have to take special stops on your way up at different times to let gases come out of your blood and out of your body. So humans don't go much deeper than, 100, 120 feet for recreational diving. And then technical diving, 120 feet and deeper, up to like around 300 feet is kind of as far down as humans tend to go. The pressure starts to get greater, less light. And then, of course, we can use things like submersibles or underwater robots, ROVs, remotely operated vehicles. So as you start to go under, even just a few feet, the pressure builds up and really hurts your ears. So as a diver, you just plug your nose and push out through your ears. And that pops your ears and that lets that pressure go. And you usually have to do it, every 10, 15, 20 feet or so. But I've been diving a lot, and a lot of times I can just move my jaw, or the air sometimes just goes on its own. But if it starts to hurt, you definitely want to stop, and you want to make sure that you get that clear. And if you're sick and your sinuses are blocked up, it's risky to dive, because then you might not be able to clear your sinuses and you could burst an eardrum. So you have to be careful. If you're not feeling well and you're stuffed up, you don't want to go diving. But it's pretty easy. You just plug and push, and that relieves the pressure. And then you do it a little bit deeper and a little bit deeper. Good question. All right, Miss Hafling's crew is hanging out with us. I'm going to pop them in here. Looks like some second and third graders. Do you have a question for us? There they are.
Do you want to come up? Sorry, someone's just coming up right now. You can stand maybe just over here so they can see you. Yeah, what's your question, Manat?
What's the favorite place you have been to?
That's a good one. Do you want to ask it a little louder?
What's your favorite place that you have been to?
Okay, really good question. If I'm picking ocean, I have to pick, I think I have to go Galapagos. The Galapagos is absolutely amazing. It's really special because it's a group of volcanic islands, and they're 1,000 miles off the coast of South America, the Galapagos. And they're really special because cold, deep, nutrient-filled water surrounds the islands. And that means that there's lots of living things. So there's a big underwater current, cold, deep, full of nutrients. And when it hits the islands, it's pushed up. And when it's pushed up near the surface, then that nutrient-rich water, all the sea creatures that love that food can have that there. And because the water's so cold, you can have penguins in the Galapagos, which is pretty crazy. You normally think of penguins in Antarctica, but actually I've seen penguins in New Zealand and in Australia, in the Galapagos, in places like Argentina, and Patagonia, so Argentina and Chile, even Brazil. So penguins don't always have to be in Antarctica. If there's nice cold water currents, lots of food to eat, then they can be in other areas too. If I had to pick land, though, I would pick Australia. I spent a year living in Australia, and it was one of the just most amazing places I've ever been, and I had a blast exploring Australia. Okay. Mr. Hergott's crew is tuning in, and they're wondering about, okay. So surfers come into contact with sharks, right? It's only natural. You're in the water, you are in their place, in their habitat, in their zone. Surfers love to be in the water early in the morning and late at the night. That's when some of the best waves come in. Now, unfortunately, that's when sharks like to hunt. So think about it. If you're a shark, it's early in the morning, or kind of the sun's going down at night, dawn or dusk, and the water's kind of murky, and it's not very light. If you're hunting, you're looking up. Are there any seals? Are there any turtles? And a human on a surfboard looks a lot like a sea turtle, looks a lot like a seal. And that's what great whites, tiger sharks, things like that, they love to eat those. So they come up and they take an exploratory bite. Now, when you're a shark, you can't come over and go, hey, what's this? What's this? The only thing you have is your mouth. And unfortunately, that mouth is full of teeth. So generally, when a human is bitten by a shark, the shark kind of goes, whoa, that's not a turtle, that's not a seal, and they head out. And a lot of people survive those bites. They are able to get back to shore, they get to the hospital. Unfortunately, a bite from a great white shark that can be 15, 16, 20 feet long can do a lot of damage. So some people do, unfortunately, bleed to death. But some people wonder, are there colors that sharks might not like? Are there, if we have electric magnets or electric kind of devices on our surfboard, will that keep sharks away? And the best answer is we don't know for sure yet. The people have done research. Sharks have a special sense. They actually have two extra senses, but the one that detects electrical wavelengths is their ampullae of Lorenzini. It's found on their front, their snouts, their rostrums. And they can detect muscle movement from fish, the weak electrical signals, which is pretty wild. And so some people think if there's a strong electric pulse on your surfboard, that might scare them off. So there have been some tests that looks like maybe that could work, but there's still more research needs to be done. And the follow-up to that question was, how do I stay safe from sharks? And some things are common sense, right? Like early in the morning, in the evening, it's not the best time to be in the water, especially on the surface. So avoiding times like that. And honestly, if you leave sharks alone, my experience has always been they're curious, they take a look, and sometimes they swim around a bit, or sometimes they just leave. So another easy thing to do is don't touch them, right? Give them their space, don't touch them, don't get in them. And the last thing I want to say about that is a saying that I love, is that people say water, they call it shark-infested water. But how can water be shark-infested if that's where sharks live? That's their home. They belong there. So they're not infesting it, they're living there. If anything, it's people-infested water. We don't live in the water, we live on land, but we come into the shark's ecosystem. Now, if one day you go to the pub or down to the restaurant and there's a shark sitting there, well, yeah, that's a shark-infested pub. That's a shark-infested restaurant. But you can't say that their home is shark-infested, because that's where they belong. Okay, let's grab a few more questions here. Let's go back to the New Mexico group.
How much plastic or pollution have you seen while diving?
Oh, really good question. Plastic pollution. Wow, that is a huge problem in our oceans. Plastic is amazing. Plastic was invented back in the 50s. It's super durable. It can last for a really long time. And when used the right way in things that are meant to last for a really long time, it's great. But unfortunately, we started using plastic for things we use for like a minute and then throw away and never use again. So single-use plastics. And plastic doesn't break down very fast. It can take hundreds of years. It can take thousands of years. In our ocean, we are putting a dump truck worth of plastic in our ocean every minute. And that's just happening every day, day in and day out. Plastic, 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 plastic. In the ocean, it doesn't biodegrade. It doesn't break apart and disappear. It goes into smaller pieces called microplastics, which are then eaten by fish and make their way through the food chain. Those plastics have toxins in them. As they accumulate, as bigger things eat the fish and more plastic, then it eventually gets to us. And then we're eating those toxins when we're eating fish from the ocean. So plastics are a huge problem. Pretty much everywhere I've been diving, there's plastics. It's just the way it is. There's a group called Adventure Scientists, and they have people all over the world take water samples. You can take water samples in Antarctica and the Arctic and still find plastic. You can find plastic in the snow, in the Arctic. You can find it in the air that we breathe. Plastic is everywhere. So we have to be a lot smarter about how we use it and when we use it. And we have to turn off the tap. So imagine your bathtub, you're filling it with water and it's plugged and it's overflowing all over your floor. What are you going to do? Are you going to grab a mop and start mopping your floor, or are you going to turn off the tap? Right? A lot of people focus on the cleaning of the plastic, but we have to turn off that tap first. We have to stop it from coming into our oceans and relying on it so much. Then we can think about doing some more cleanup. So we got to turn that tap off because we are flooding our planet with plastic. And even I was on an expedition on a ship called the Nautilus, a deep sea expedition. We were using robots to dive 3 kilometers deep in the ocean. And we still saw Dr. Pepper cans and balloons and other things on the bottom. So yeah, plastic is everywhere. Colorado, do you guys have another question?
Yes, we do. We have a question from Ginger.
My question is, have you ever been to the Dead Sea?
Have you ever been to the Dead Sea? No, I haven't. I was just reading about the Dead Sea. I read a great book by one of my friends. He's a great explorer. He's an author. He's a filmmaker. And he went to the Middle East and he walked 1,000 kilometers through the Middle East just on foot. And, you know, the Middle East is one of the most misunderstood regions on the planet. We see one picture of it in the news where it's dangerous and violent and you shouldn't go. But in actuality, the Middle East is a large area and the vast majority of people there are peaceful and loving and kind and accepting. And, you know, he walked through to kind of, you know, really tell their stories. And he walked through Israel and Palestine and parts of Egypt and a few other places in the area, and basically told those stories. And one of the spots he visited was the Dead Sea. So if you don't know about the Dead Sea, it's it's the lowest place on the planet. It's super salty, the water. So if you jump into it, it's really hard to sink. You just float on the top. Like people go and they just float on the top and read their magazines, and it's really hard to dive down deep. But where places like that, inland seas like the Dead Sea, are disappearing. We're changing our planet through climate change, and the Dead Sea is shrinking smaller and smaller every year. He mentioned in the book that there were homes that he passed by that used to be on the shore, but are now like hundreds of meters, kilometers away from where the shore used to be. So yeah, the Dead Sea, I've never been there myself, but I've heard stories about it. Lowest place on the planet and crazy amount of salt in the water. So you just kind of bob on the surface. It's really difficult to sink there. Very cool. Second and third graders, do you have another question? There they are.
Dexter, come on up. You can ask right here, buddy.
Okay. Have you been to Mexico?
Have I been to? Yeah, absolutely. I love diving in Mexico. I've been diving in Cozumel and Puerto Vallarta. Mexico is another one of those countries, though, that sometimes has a reputation for being a violent spot. And there's no question that things happen sometimes, but my experience in Mexico have always been awesome. Amazing people, amazing sights, amazing diving. Yeah, I really like visiting Mexico. And let's think of something really cool I saw once in Mexico. I did a dive once. We went out really far from shore and we went really deep into the water. So we saw some really cool sharks. And then this huge school of fish called trevally, the big fish, came swimming by, and it was almost like a big cloud made it go dark, made the sky go dark where we were underwater. Just so many fish. It was really, really cool. Great question. All right. Well, we're getting to the time where we'll probably start thinking about wrapping things up. I'll take a quick look at YouTube to see if we have another question there. Here's a question here. Oh, we've got one class, and Howard's class says they voted and they think that they love I love sharks the most, but the sea lions are fun too. Yeah, I do love sharks. There's something special about being in the water with sharks. They're amazing. I mean, sharks have been around for like 400 million years. Sharks were around when the dinosaurs were hanging out. Sharks, if you look at them, their fossils in time have hardly changed because they're such well-designed predators. But sharks are in trouble. Some populations of sharks have decreased by 90%. 90%. Sharks are keystone species. Keystone species, that means if you lose sharks, you lose a whole bunch of other things, because sharks kind of keep things in check on the coral reef. The sick and healthy fish, they keep populations from getting too high. We lose sharks, a keystone species, our coral reefs are in big trouble. Our oceans are in big, big trouble. So one easy thing you can do is talk to people, tell people about sharks, tell them about what's happening, is a great thing you can do. And then be careful with your seafood. Sometimes you think you're eating one kind of fish, but it's another. It's labeled differently to try and sell it. Sometimes shark can even end up in fish and chips. So, be careful where you're buying your fish and think about that. Sometimes shark parts even end up in makeup. Their liquid in their liver called squalene can end up in makeup and cosmetics. So yeah, I have to think about how we can protect sharks. And sometimes just our daily activities and just talking to people can be a great way to help protect sharks. Awesome. So yeah, our classes are still here. So let's see if there's one more question. Why not? All right, Miss Neville, go ahead.
Okay. If you could explore anywhere in the world, where would you want to go? Land or sea or even space?
Oh, well, I mean, I'd love to go to space. If somebody came to me and said, yeah, absolutely, you can go to space, you can go to the space station, I would do that in a heartbeat. But picking somewhere closer to home, we host a lot of astronauts, and they always have a similar message when they look back at Earth, and you can see the planet, and you can see that it's not that big, and we only have one of them, and it's protected by this tiny, tiny skin. The Earth is like an apple, and the atmosphere is like the skin, the thin skin of an apple. We live in this incredibly amazing place. We are so lucky, but we are treating it like there's tons of extra ones, which is kind of scary. And, they look at that, and if everybody could get that view, if everybody could go to space and look back and see what we have, our blue and green marble, I think that we'd make some changes pretty quick. I think we'd really have a feel for how lucky we are and how special and actually how small our planet is. It seems big to us, but in all of the universe, 14 million light years or so and growing, we don't know of any other planet like Earth that can sustain life. We don't know yet. So on the planet, if I could go anywhere, wow, there's so many places. The list is like huge. I think I'd want to go and spend some time in Africa, or maybe in Borneo, into the rainforest, and maybe see some orangutans in the wild, or maybe somewhere in Africa like Madagascar and see some lemurs. That would be pretty cool. Yeah, those would be some places I'd pick. Colorado.
Yes, I have a question from Rebecca. Rebecca, if I can get her. All right, Rebecca, you want to speak up and ask your question?
Have you ever made the shark fall asleep?
That's a great question. I know exactly what you're talking about. It's called tonic immobility. Tonic immobility is this really kind of strange thing about sharks. If you flip them upside down, they kind of go into this state where they're almost like in a coma. They don't move. They're still breathing, but they're just kind of laying there. Killer whales have even been known to hunt sharks and turn them upside down. So they go into tonic immobility. So it's pretty, it's a pretty wild thing. And if people don't really know 100% what's going on, we often do calls with the Ripley's Aquarium of Canada in Toronto, and they have zebra sharks. And so they do that to the zebra sharks when they want to take blood samples, see how healthy they are. If they're sick, they turn them over. They've trained them. So if you go to our YouTube channel and look up zebra sharks, you can find some of those events where we go live to the aquarium, and basically they train the sharks to come up and turn upside down, and then they go into that tonic immobility, and then they can check them out and they can make sure that they're healthy. And then of course they feed them while they're doing that. So the sharks are like, well, I mean, this is great. This isn't so bad. But yeah, tonic immobility is you flip a shark upside down. I don't know if it works on every species, but it definitely works on several of them. But no, I've never turned a shark over. Again, it's just kind of respecting their space. And, it's much better to see them, to take pictures and video and have those memories than to try to, reach out and grab them. Very cool. Well, I want to thank everyone for joining today. I know our plans changed. We were supposed to hang out at the Toucan Rescue Ranch, but technology did not allow that today. We will be hanging out with them twice again next month. So I believe it's around the 6th. We're going to there again to hang out with the sloths. So that event's there on the website. And then later in the month, we will take another trip to the Toucan Rescue Ranch and we'll visit the toucans and the parrots. So you might want to try to sign up for that one. It'll be around this time again. So hopefully we can get your groups in for some of that action, and they'll be up on the website. So thanks everyone for hanging out. I hope you learned something cool about the ocean. I hope you're thinking about exploring our ocean, protecting our ocean. And yeah, maybe looking at marine biology as a career. We have better maps of the moon and Mars than we do of our ocean, of the sea floor. We're discovering new species all the time. So there's so much good science to be done in our ocean. So think about that when you're thinking about what you might want to do in the future. And being a marine biologist could be your ticket to exploring places all over the planet. So thanks so much for everybody for hanging out. We are going to sign off for today, and hopefully we see your cruise again in April. Thanks, everyone.